Worldwide movement, peace, love, respect. Big King Sadiq hollering at you one more game. Steelers Nation. Ha ha. Word life. Steelers game prep. Welcome again to another week of Steelers game prep. Week number 6, right? And hey, man, listen, it's ebbs and flows of a season, right? I say that because we know that the Steelers lost again last week. But that's all right. Didn't think they were necessarily going to go undefeated, right? The goal is to win as many games as possible, getting increasingly better as the year goes, as they secured a division title, hopefully, and punch their ticket to the dance, to the tournament, as Tomlin likes to say, right? And then once they do that, take care of business and try to get to the next goal and the ultimate goal, which is the Super Bowl. All right. Excuse me. So this week, folks, we got to handle business. The Steelers got to bounce back and get back in the winning ways, as Coach Tomlin said. His deed is the focus, right? So let's take a look at a few of my notes and thoughts, right? I apologize. My stats aren't quite as detailed this week for some reason. I had a little difficulty finding some of the statistics I was looking for, particularly in terms of personnel usage. I usually like to go over each team's personnel usage, deployment of 11, 12, and 13 personnel, but those stats were a little ambiguous and just a little difficult to find solid stats on. So we'll forego that, but take a look at least at some of the offensive stats for each team. I did find at least that each team's deployment of 11 personnel, right? And the Raiders deployed 11 personnel, as you would perhaps figure, significantly greater than the Steelers. The Raiders deployed their 11 personnel, which is one running back, one tight end, and 3 wide receivers, 76.3% of the time, right? Which is fairly, that's the upper half of the league. Not necessarily at the top, but certainly the upper half of the league, where the Steelers conversely deployed their 11 personnel only 42% of the time. And we know that for both teams, that's reflective of usage of 12 and 13 personnel. Certainly if they're, there's only but so many percentage the pie can be split. The Steelers have been lately using a lot of 13 personnel, which I like. Again, showing their commitment, man, to being the Steelers are serious about running the ball, man. And their personnel deployment shows that, right? The way that they line up really bears that out by having more tight ends on the field and giving you especially, man, I always tip my hat when we talk about blocking and tight ends to Darnell Washington, man. Probably the best, if not the best, certainly among the best blocking tight ends in the league. He's like having another tight end, another offensive lineman out there in that regard. So shout out to Big D, right? One time. Okay. Yards per play. The Raiders are averaging 5 yards per play. The Steelers are averaging close at 4.8 yards per play. Neither one setting the NFL world on fire, right? Rush percentage. Now, I'm going to get into rushing percentage and passing percentage. The Raiders run the ball 36.58% of the time, and they pass the ball 63.42% of the time, right? Um, so they show a definite lean toward passing percentage, right? And the Steelers, conversely, at 52.23%, excuse me, 23. 52.23% of the time they run the ball, and 47.77% of the time they pass the ball. The Raiders are completing the ball. The quarterbacks complete the ball at 68.6% percent of the time they're completing the ball, and the Steelers are at 67.88% of the time they're completing the ball. Third down conversion, 35.94%. Close, you might as well say 36% complete, or excuse me, third down conversion for the Raiders. That's a little below the pack, right? A little on the lower half of the league. So I'm sure their coaches would say they need to show vast improvement there. The Steelers are a little bit better at 40.58% third down conversion, which is a little closer to the middle of the pack, but still subpar, right? And they have already, Coach Tomlin has even spoken about and addressed that they need to improve theirs, certainly. Red zone scoring percentage. The Raiders, when in the red zone, are scoring the ball either touchdown or field goal at 66.67% of the time. The Steelers, conversely, when in the red zone, are only scoring either touchdown or field goal 50% of the time. That's not going to get it. That is not going to get it, right? And that's an area that the offense most certainly needs to improve drastically. If we take a look at some of the offensive standouts, or at least not going there yet. If we take a look at the production, right, what have they done? The offensive touchdown production, the Raiders have scored 4 touchdowns rushing the ball and 4 touchdowns passing the ball. So pretty even distribution between rushing and passing touchdowns. The Steelers also have very even distribution in passing and rushing touchdowns, but only 3 rushing and 3 passing. Both teams, I'm sure, would say they would like to be a lot more prolific in terms of their number of touchdowns in totality, but probably like to maintain that even balance, right? I know I would certainly like to see the Steelers do that. All right. Let's get into some defensive tendencies. I apologize for, again, not having as detailed statistics as I do typically for each team. But just talk about the Raiders a little bit, having allowed 886 yards passing. I got some varying stats on their completion percentage. We'll go with their opponent's completion percentage at 68.5%, which is too high. We're talking about almost 69%, which is close to 70% complete. Not good, right? Too high. Their opponents are gaining 5.5 yards per play. And their opponents on third downs are converting at 30% of the time, which is actually pretty good, right? That's toward the up. We'll give them props. We always, as we continue to do on this show, we give everybody their props when their props are due, right? And that's in the upper half of the league at yielding on 30% third down completion percentage to their opponents. Their opponents' red zone scoring percentage, however, is way too high. Way too high. So when their opponents get in the red zone, they're allowing some form of scoring at 61.11% of the time their opponents are scoring. All right. Let's look at just a few for the Steelers. We know pretty much what the story is there, and that's where I'm going to go off script and talk a little bit more loosely in a moment about where they're at. Certainly the coaches are and the players, I'm sure, but I know I'm a little disappointed, as I'm sure all of you are, in the defensive production in the past couple of weeks. I'm just going to say that their opponent's yards per play has upped, right, to 5.1, still lower than the Raiders at 5.5, but it's upped to 5.1, which is, getting them right around middle of the pack now. See, that ain't where we want to be at. Nah, we want to be the top dogs. Opponent's completion percentage upped to 64.05%. Again, not where we want to be at and not where we were, right? Opponent's third down conversion percentage, not stellar, but at 38.71%, can be better. And I would even challenge that statistic, to be honest. I'm not certain on the accuracy of that, because at least in the last two games, certainly they have been allowing their opponents to convert on third down at way too high a clip, both to Dallas and to Indianapolis. All right, I'm going to go to my standout players, a couple of them. On defense for the Raiders, their leader in tackles has been Robert Spillane. The Spillane train, as we call him affectionately here in Pittsburgh, many of us. He leads them with 54 tackles, right? I mean, it's not even half of the year, and he's already on pace to be well over a buck. But unfortunately, maybe he's working a little too much and needs a little more group help distribution of those tackles. He also leads with one interception. I think they do have another player or two with an interception, but I didn't take note. The Steelers, conversely, their tackling leader is Deshaun Elliott, which we would all probably agree he's been a magnificent pickup so far, in addition to the team. And also, he has 39 tackles, and also Deshaun Jackson has 2 interceptions, and we would all say that he's been a very welcomed upgrade as well to that second corner position. He's played above expectations in my opinion. All right. Offensively for the Raiders, of course, the quarterback, Gardner Minshew, is their passing leader with 1,014 yards. Of course, Justin Fields has been the quarterback for the Steelers so far with 961 yards. For the Raiders, their rushing leader has been Zaire White, I believe, if I'm not saying his first name correctly. Excuse me, folks. At times I'm guilty of that. White, the running back, with 152 yards is the leader, but they do, I know, in the Raiders scheme, certainly spread their carries out fairly evenly. Najee Harris has been our rushing leader with 270 yards rushing so far. Um, their receiving leader has actually been a tight end, Brock Bowers, with 313 yards receiving. All right. And George Pickens has been our receiving leader, as you would guess, with 310 yards so far. So those are just a few of the player standouts. Um, and in my notes and stats and whatnot. Now, a little bit more on my thoughts. I was surprised, to be honest, to see the Steelers fall for the quote unquote trap game, right? Which is when you overlook a team um, looking onward, which is what I thought they did in losing to Indianapolis, because their defensive performance was not akin to what we'd seen so far, right? But then, alarmingly, this past week, uh, certainly not a trap game. You would figure they'd be extremely amped up, and not saying they weren't, not saying they didn't play hard. They certainly did, but just you didn't have the overall performance in terms of certainly limiting the points scored by Dallas and the yards production wise. Now, Dak Prescott is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, period. But still, certainly, we got to do a lot better in what we allow quarterbacks to do, particularly how we allowed him to convert long first downs over and over again in the passing game. We gotta eliminate that. Absolutely have to eliminate that. Need to really see um, the defense in general much better in terms of the opponent's conversion percentage. I know the stat I gave, like I said, I challenged that because at least the past couple weeks, they really have been giving um, their opponents the ability to convert on third down at too high of a clip, right? And many of those have been long third downs, and that is even more alarming when we see that we get the opposite, the opponent in a long third down, 3rd and 7 plus, honestly. We know it's a passing down, and that should be the down where our defense tees off with the pass rushers, and if they can't get home, get up with your jumps, bat them balls down, effectiveness out of the front seven in some form or fashion we need to see. Um, a little better than what we've seen in the past couple of weeks. Now, again, we're injured. Not again, but we all know we are injured and have a lot of injuries to our edge rushers in particular. But still, next man up. We just have to improve in that area with whoever's playing. And then the linebackers really have not stayed with tight ends as well as what we've would have liked, and some of the crossing routes and under routes as well. We just need to see that coverage tightened up in the middle of the field, particularly that intermediate area of the middle of the field, intermediate depth of the middle of the field. We need to see that cleaned up, and some of the short stuff as well. And then deep, again, we've given up too many long. To me, if it's a 3rd and 13 and they converted, they just hit you with a pass that was way too deep for us to be giving up on third down, right? We got to clean that up. A lot of it they've already addressed and identified as miscommunication, which is understandable. Not that it's understandable. It's at least an area that we know that the team can address directly and work to improve. It's identifiable and correctable, which should yield you better results. So yeah, that's what I really love to see out of the defense in terms of improvement. And of course, you always want to see increased short tackling, which that has been getting better. I was a little concerned early on about some of the tackling tendencies I'd seen, but I think that probably happens just naturally as the season progresses. I'm sure the coaches would likely say as well. Um, okay, that's the defense. Special teams, man, has been a shiner pretty much. We've had, of course, great kicking again. Nobody beats the bars, right? Nobody beats the bars. Nobody beats the bars, right? Dig that. Um, so Boswell's been stellar again so far in the kicking game. Our punts, we suffered. We know the tragic season industry to our punter, and then we've had a more than serviceable job by the our his replacement. Williamson has done a great job so far, and so that's really solid. And coverage has been pretty much solid on punts and kickoffs as well. So, um, and we've had some decent returns. The special teams has been pretty good. There's always room for improvement. We'd certainly love to see more splash, um, maybe in the returns and maybe a splash play, somewhere else, in coverage or in maybe defending kicks. We know field goals in particular. We know my man Killer Brew is liable to dive in there, slice in there, and maybe block one. So we would love to see that. This would be a great week for it, right? Um, but yeah, we really have had pretty good special teams, but we'd love to see always improvement everywhere. In the offense, I'll start by saying I think I've seen a little bit of an improvement by the offensive line as they gain continuity with each other. Still a lot of different mixtures we've seen, but overall, the way they're playing is with a little more continuity, I think, and we've seen a little better production. Certainly, a lot more room for improvement in the run game, certainly for one, and in passing too. Seeing penetration early, little too often. Still, would love to see some improvement there. Um, and in the running game, some bigger initial holes and elimination of the other team's players in the backfield on our running plays, making it difficult for our running backs to get a start. Certainly, that's very difficult for Najee's style, right? So to overcome. So those are some improvements on the line. Tight ends, we'd like to see a little bit more production. I'm very pleased to see uh, Arthur Smith going to Darnell Washington. Certainly more than we've seen in the past, and I'd like to see an increase there. And then, more utilization of Fryermuth because we know um, he can do more. And I honestly believe the more we go to him, the more prolific he will be. Certainly, kudos to him on the way he muscled his way in for that touchdown. Right, that was dope. Um, let's see, wideouts. George has been great so far. I understand his frustration in terms of his numbers and production, maybe his number of looks, but George has been great so far. A few things you like to clean up. The behavioral things, Tomlin will address that and deal with that. Not worried about that. The room in general, we need to see more production out of. I feel like there's been a little too many drops around the room, I'll say, honestly, because with those catches, I feel like we be saying we're actually seeing decent enough production out of the room, or at least decent production. It can certainly improve, but I think the reason for the production being a bit subpar can directly be pointed to drops. Um, uh, it's just an identifiable and I remember identifiable and correctable area that we can see improved results from. Um, but yeah, I think if that happens, naturally we'll see more production, particularly out of uh, our third and our second and third wide receiver positions. Whoever we flex in and out of those between uh, Calvin and 11. Um, wide receiver, anything else wanted to really see? Um, and also, I will say, not necessarily, well, this will slide me right into the quarterbacks. There have been some times we've had some guys open that haven't been hit or have had less than catchable balls thrown at them. Not nitpicking at at what Justin has done, because overall his completion percentage has been really good, although it has dropped at least in the first half of the last couple of games. So I'd like to see maybe him off to a better start hitting his targets. And certainly also cleaned up pocket play, man. We can't have any more fumble snaps. Um, get rid of the ball if you don't have a clear read. Don't take unnecessary sacks. Just really, really, really need to see cleaned up pocket play out of Justin. But other than that, again, we've seen him overall this year take leaps and bounds in terms of improvements. But there's still those areas that just have to get cleaned up in a hurry, right? Um, and happy about Russ's elevated health status, right? Excited to see what he's going to be in the Steelers uniform. I just like to see him out there in a game setting, playing and seeing what would he look like. I've already expressed in a number of times in a number of ways how impressed I've been with Justin Fields' growth so far this year. But I am still very curious to see what Russell could do. I'd like to see some of the moon balls dropping down in on George and Calvin, some of the other receivers. Vance, and certainly, I think we can get a lot more out of Vance. He's had a few drops that I think he'll clean up, being the veteran receiver he is. I think Vance Jefferson has got something to offer, and I think we'll see that sooner than later. Scotty Miller, I think, can probably catch some defenses slipping from time to time, hit him. So there's meat on the bone for the offense that I think we'd all like to see, and I think we will see. And like I said, I like to see maybe, maybe if Russ is in there is some of that meat he can get at, and maybe Justin, as he continues to improve, will get at some more of the meat on that bone. I don't want to keep. I'd use that because that's a bit of a Tomlinism, but Anyway, so the theme is we need overall improvement, right? And those are some of the areas, but of course we need overall improvement because they're in a 2-game losing streak. And we can't let that skid continue on to 3. So we need to see improvement across the board, and they'll certainly have a better opportunity to close out a game and secure victory. And get back to the winning ways, man. They win again this week, then we're looking at 4-2, and things are looking good through 6 games, right? I think we'd all agree at that. And they'll still be tied at the top of the division at the very least. And you never know whether Baltimore will win this week or not. So that's that. All right, folks. We look forward to seeing the Steelers get back into their winning ways. We know they can do it. They have the roster to do it. To have the wherewithal, excuse me, to stand this wave of injuries that they've seen as of late. And don't get it twisted, they are banged up, and have a lot of new faces contributing in a lot of new places. A lot of new faces contributing in a lot of new places. And because of that, the tendency can be there for production to waver. But with the Steelers' mindset, that next man up attitude, we want to see some surprises, right? And see production not waver, but remain steady and maybe even spike. We might see some surprise splash plays, folks. So let's stay on the positive lookout for that. And I mean splash both on defense and offense, and from some surprising contributors, right? I don't think Warren's playing again this week, so we're going to see more running back rotation, nor is Cordell Patterson. So, we're going to see some more faces contributing at running back for sure. Maybe we'll get some surprise contributions in the passing game, and wherever we might see a splash play on defense is certainly welcome, right? And I feel confident that we can see that, and maybe from some surprising names, maybe some new names, right? So let's look for that. Here we go, Steelers. Let's get that energy up, right? And let's look forward with high vibe expectation, right, to a magnificent game from the Pittsburgh Steelers this week. Man, I love you all. I thank you all. Keep the energy high. Let's be strong moving into this game. And let the Steelers take that energy with them and secure victory against the Las Vegas Raiders. Big King Sadiq, Steelers game prep. I'm out.